Let's read together from the 11th chapter of the Gospel of John today. Not really going to have a sermon since we have been engaging in prayer in a variety of ways and giving most of our time to that. But I do want us to hear this beautiful story, and I do want to reflect for a few moments with you on it. So John chapter 11, we'll read verses 1 through 7 and then verses 14 through 45. Now a certain man was ill, Lazarus of Bethany, the village of Mary and her sister Martha. Martha was the one who anointed the Lord with perfume and wiped his feet with her hair. Her brother Lazarus was ill. So the sisters sent a message to Jesus, "Lord, he whom you love is ill." But when Jesus heard it, he said, "This illness does not lead to death. Rather, it is for God's glory, so that the Son of God may be glorified through it." Accordingly, though Jesus loved Martha and her sister and Lazarus, having heard that Lazarus was ill, he stayed 2 days longer in the place where he was. Then after this, he said to the disciples, "Let us go to Judea again." Verse 14. He said to them plainly, "Lazarus is dead. For your sake I am glad I was not there, so that you may believe. But let us go to him." Thomas, who was called the twin, said to his fellow disciples, "Let us also go, that we may die with him." When Jesus arrived, he found that Lazarus had already been in the tomb 4 days. Now Bethany was near Jerusalem, some 2 miles away, and many of the Jews had come to Martha and Mary to console them about their brother. When Martha heard that Jesus was coming, she went and met him, while Mary stayed at home. Martha said to Jesus, "Lord, if you had been here, my brother would not have died. But even now I know that God will give you whatever you ask of him." Jesus said to her, "Your brother will rise again." Martha said to him, "I know that he will rise again in the resurrection on the last day." Jesus said to her, "I am the resurrection and the life. Those who believe in me, even though they die, will live. And everyone who lives and believes in me will never die. Do you believe this?" She said to him, "Yes, Lord. I believe that you are the Messiah, the Son of God, the one coming into the world." When she had said this, she went back and called her sister Mary and told her privately, "The teacher is here and is calling for you." And when she heard it, she got up quickly and went to him. Now Jesus had not yet come to the village, but was still at the place where Martha had met him. The Jews who were with her in the house, consoling her, saw Mary get up quickly and go out. They followed her because they thought that she was going to the tomb to weep there. When Mary came where Jesus was and saw him, she knelt at his feet and said to him, "Lord, if you had been here, my brother would not have died." When Jesus saw her weeping, and the Jews who came with her also weeping, he was greatly disturbed in spirit and deeply moved. He said, "Where have you laid him?" They said to him, "Lord, come and see." Jesus began to weep. So the Jews said, "See how he loved him." But some of them said, "Could not he who opened the eyes of the blind have kept this man from dying?" Then Jesus, again greatly disturbed, came to the tomb. It was a cave, and a stone was lying against it. Jesus said, "Take away the stone." Martha, the sister of the dead man, said to him, "Lord, already there is a stench, because he has been dead 4 days." Jesus said to her, "Did I not tell you that if you believed, you would see the glory of God?" So they took away the stone. And Jesus looked upward and said, "Father, I thank you for having heard me. I knew that you always hear me, but I have said this for the sake of the crowd standing here, so that they may believe that you sent me." When he had said this, he cried with a loud voice, "Lazarus, come out!" The dead man came out, his hands and feet bound with strips of cloth, and his face wrapped in a cloth. Jesus said to them, "Unbind him and let him go." Many of the Jews, therefore, who had come with Mary, and had seen what Jesus did, believed in him. This is the word of the Lord. Thanks be to God for his word today. There is so much that could be said about this wonderful story, more than enough for many, many, many sermons. Yet today we have decided to keep the focus of our service on prayer. And so I want to reflect with you for a few minutes on Jesus' prayer here in this passage, and the awesome, life-giving power that his prayer releases on earth. Jesus' prayer is so brief that it can almost get lost in the telling of the story. It's a long story, and Jesus' prayer seems to be almost a sidelight. It is not a long prayer. It is not a spectacular prayer. It is not an eloquent prayer. It is very matter of fact, in fact, and quite honestly, not really anything that you might even notice. Maybe that's the point. He simply says, "Father, I know that you have heard me. I know you always hear me, but I say this for the sake of the people who are standing here, making it clear that what is about to happen is a result of his prayer relationship with the Father. It is a result of a connection between heaven and earth that is so deeply real between Jesus and the Father. This quiet prayer, Jesus' presence here in this place of death, this cemetery, which in a way represents the entire world, brings about this mighty miracle, a tremendous demonstration of the power of life over death. And yet there is a question that hangs heavily over the scene. It's not just hanging over the scene, it's on the lips of multiple characters within the scene, probably in the minds of many more. Why did he have to wait so long? Why weren't you here? Why did we have to wait for you to get here? And why did we have to experience this death? Why, Jesus? And I think that every praying person has probably found occasion to ask that. Why don't you listen? Why does nothing happen when I pray? Why, God? If only you had been here, all of these bad things would not have happened. I love this reflection from a man that I have never met, but I found him in an online web magazine. His name is Daniel Clenenden. And I quote from his article, "Lord," Martha cried, "if you had been here, my brother would not have died." Mary, her sister, said the exact same thing. "Lord, if you had been here, my brother would not have died." Amidst all the grief and the tears, the neighbors could not help but mumble their own version of this as they said aside to one another, "Could not he who opened the eyes of the blind man get this man from dying? Could he not have prevented all this horrible pain and death and heartache we see in front of us?" Jesus did not answer their question. Instead, in the shortest verse in the entire Bible, he demonstrated one of the most important characteristics we could ever learn about the heart and the character of God. Jesus wept. When Jesus experienced these sisters, Mary and Martha, weeping for their dead brother Lazarus, and when he experienced their distraught neighbors we read that he was deeply moved in spirit and troubled. The God whom Christians worship is not a remote and aloof sky god way off somewhere over there, well removed from the pain of our world. He is not that kind of God. No, he is a tender God, deeply moved, even grieved by anything and everything that threatens our human well-being. Jesus wept. Jesus was deeply moved by the power of death that is so grotesquely marring this family and this neighborhood. He is deeply moved, and in his spirit he cries, and with his body he cries real tears. Not some kind of fake crocodile tears, though I understand, but I'm going to do something to make this better. These are not fake tears. This is the fountain, the wellspring, from which what happens next comes. God not only empathizes with our many weaknesses, he also acts. Jesus wept with Mary and Martha, and then he raised Lazarus from the dead. Of course, human experience tells us that God does not act exactly when and where and how we think he should act. He certainly did not in this situation. Why does God allow death, suffering, all of this suffering, and only in the aftermath of it come to bring help? We will never really understand that, I don't think. But we are left to wait in hope. The psalmist, as we opened our service today with Psalm 130, the psalmist cries out to God with full confidence in God's compassionate love. But even so, he also says 5 times, perhaps also talking to himself, that he must wait. 5 times in that short 6-verse psalm, the psalmist speaks of waiting. This is a part, such an important part of prayer. Part of Christian maturity involves learning to wait, confident not so much about the chances for a rosy outcome or about exactly where and when and how God will act, but confident that he will act. We wait in hope even while we cry out of the depths to God. The alternative is to lose hope and to spiral into despair. It is not God's will or plan for us to do that. We ought always to pray and not to faint. Today we have been given a fresh challenge to pray in new ways, perhaps, for new kinds of concerns, perhaps, that we maybe haven't spent a lot of time praying about before. We've been invited to broaden the scope of our concerns in prayer from praying for individual people and their needs to praying for the institutions of our society. Through the past several weeks, we have returned again and again to the letter B in the word bless, which, as John and Dave Ferguson talk about in their book we've been going through, the B is to begin with prayer. Again and again, we've been reminded to begin with prayer for our neighbors. And we want to continue to be faithful in keeping that focus on praying for our neighbors, praying for the people literally who live around you, learning their names, listening to their stories, eating with them, serving with them, eventually, maybe, hopefully, getting to share your story of salvation with them. And we want to continue to be faithful in that focus, but also to be faithful, as this new prayer guide will enable, to be faithful in praying for one another, praying for one another's families and one another's neighbors. We want to be faithful to pray for our neighbors living around here in our community in which our church is located. And we want to pray for the community organizations and industries and institutions of various kinds that make up our society, that it would be a society of thriving and of flourishing, that the powers of death and darkness would be overcome in our world. And there are so many of those powers at work in our world. So we can stand with God's people across the ages as people lifting up our hearts and voices in prayer to the God upon whom we wait and whom we wait in hope. And as we do, we will be tempted to give up, to fall into hopelessness or frustration with what may often feel like God's habit of procrastinating. To say, I guess I'm just wasting my breath, wasting my time. But let this story be a constantly renewing reminder to us that in response to our prayers, our God will indeed act. That even if you are praying out of the depths, you can always wait in hope and pray in hope. And so may we do just that. Amen.